Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Russ Bradford, your District 13 council member. I appreciate everybody for spending some of their time this evening to listen to this presentation about a potential apartment complex that's being proposed for our community on Bell Road across from Heron Point. This Zoom will also be live streamed on Facebook. So I will be monitoring both Facebook and Zoom for any questions or comments that I'll bring up later during any Q&A. At this time, I do want to recognize that we have Matthew Wilkinson, who works for the council office. He's our planning liaison. And we also have Mr. John Honeysucker, who is our jack of all trades with Metro Water and Public Works, who they're here to answer any potential questions in regards to water, public works infrastructure, and planning questions, etc. We also have representatives from Embry, the developer wishing to do this project. And so with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to y'all and let y'all proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Councilman Bradford. My name is Brad Canali. I'm with Embry Partners, and if you'll, let's see, I can share my screen, I assume?
Yes, I just made you a co-host.
Okay. Okay. All right, can everybody hear me? Okay. Once again, Brad Canali with Embry Partners. We are a multifamily development company based in San Antonio, Texas, with a large presence here in Nashville. I've been working and heavily involved in communities in Nashville for the last 9 years now, going back to 2012 when we did our first project down in Franklin. To date, we've completed or have under construction 5 existing communities that we've done throughout Williamson County and Davidson County, and are here tonight to present on a site that we have identified to do hopefully our next community here in Nashville. A little bit about Embry. We are a vertically integrated development company. We have in-house development, general contracting, and property management, which we're very proud of. The key to good sustainable communities, we believe, is excellent property management, which we obviously have in-house. So if you'll allow me tonight, I'm going to go through and show you a few slides of existing projects we have so you can see the quality that we represent, and then go through the site that we currently are working on, answer any questions, tell you what we know about it, tell you what our plan is, address what we know are pending issues and concerns along the Bell Road corridor, approach how we intend to develop the site, and then answer any questions. If you'll make note of my email address up there, I'm always available to answer any questions in the future about this proposal. So Retreat at Iron Horse is a community that just received one kind of a best-in-class award from the Greater Nashville Apartment Association. It's down in Franklin. It probably represents the most context of what we're doing here, proposing here. It's a 3-story surface parked development. We're very proud of it. Like I said, it won several awards here back in 2020 from the Nashville Apartment Association. It's a farmhouse architecture, similar roof lines with what we would propose here, similar style of materials. Very proud of this development down in Franklin. Artesa was our first community also that we developed here down in Williamson County. It was in Franklin. It was a 4-story development, a little bit out of scale for what we're proposing here, but just wanted to show it to you real quickly so you can see the quality. Knox at Metro Center is currently wrapping up construction. It's both 3- and 4-story construction. It's in Metro Center. It overlooks the Tennessee Titans practice facility there on the lake and should open in the next couple of weeks. And then Caroline was a development we did starting back in 2014, worked with the Nashville Sounds. We actually had a site under contract for that is now the baseball park. So worked with both the Metro planning staff, Metro Council, worked with the state of Tennessee to come up with a three-way land swap and develop this project just north of the ballpark in downtown. So the site we're talking about here, I've highlighted on my screen. It's outlined in red. You can get, it's a 16-acre site, just a little over 16 acres. The current zoning on it is R15, which is low medium density residential. With the combined entitlements that currently exist, you could develop up to 73 single family lots and 18 duplex lots with the existing entitlements. Our proposed plan is to kind of consolidate the site, develop about 12 acres of it, leaving about 4 acres, which I'll show you in a site plan here in a few minutes, and develop about 288 residential units. The product type we're proposing is 3-story garden style with 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, standalone clubhouse and leasing office with some detached garages and carports, have a pool, have a dog park. And I like the site really because it's so close to the park and the lake with great access to the outdoors, which is very attractive to residents. The community, we're going to design it to attract a resident who does not want to live downtown. I know there's with the COVID situation, there's people wanting to move from closer to the suburbs, out into the suburbs, away from downtown, and that's who we're kind of attracting here. Rental rates ranging from $1,300 for a 1-bedroom up to $1,900 for a 3-bedroom. Those are projected averages that we have right now. And our income standards for our communities at Embry is that the monthly rent, your monthly income needs to be 2.5 times the monthly rent. So that puts the $1,300 unit right at just under $40,000 income qualification. So it definitely meets a workforce housing need that's greatly needed here in Nashville. We also strive to have a courtesy officer on site, Nashville police officer, could be a sheriff's deputy, working and living on site, working with our property management, engaging with the residents to address any safety concerns. This is a proposed site plan. What we've done is, obviously the site has quite a bit of topography. And what we tried to do is, see if my mouse works here, is really focus on the flat part site and leave a natural 4 plus or minus acre green belt here buffer against Bell Road and against just really don't touch this area. We want to leave it natural in its natural state. If you'll notice, we've got the contours here. I want to point this out. This inner ring here is a 600 elevation. And our proposed buildings are at a 590. So really the only cut or excavation we plan on doing on the main body of the site is right here on the top, cutting this little knoll down and then actually placing material and filling on the outer perimeters of the site. So it's a relatively flat site once you get up on top. Obviously the access is a little bit tricky with the cliff here right across from the Heron Point entrance. This is, as you would come into the entrance, draw it and wind up a road. We designed this road to meet residential standards as far as grade goes. It's a little bit tricky, but it's how the site best suits to minimize the impact and work with the existing topography of the land that we have. We also assumed that our driveway entrance needed to align with Heron Point. We haven't presented this plan formally to the city, but we're just making some assumptions on the best place for a driveway would be across from an existing driveway. We have keeping a buffer here against the Pleasant Hill side. These would be detached garages. We've intentionally pushed all the buildings away from the street, and so that you have buildings right on top of it overlooking the street and have instead parking. And then we would have detached garages, and we could always add a few of these to act as a further buffer along the Pleasant Hill side. We do have to have by code a secondary access, but we would propose that this access be emergency only. It would be a gated access, accessible only for emergency services. Inspiration, we like this style of architecture, but we're really early on in the process. Use of materials, we strive to have articulate roof lines, balance of materials, not all dominating of one material, whether it be brick or rock or siding. We like to have a good balance and not have one dominant material. So we're very early on, but these are just some inspirational photos that we're working on. So to address the traffic concerns, we are very open to listening to the needs and the wants of the community. On many developments that we've done here in Middle Tennessee, we have installed traffic signals, whether they were warranted or slightly met the warrants. I understand traffic flow is a concern. If Metro will allow us, we will be willing to install a traffic signal at our front entrance, obviously subject to Metro approval. We also understand there's some various speed limit changes along Bell Road. If it's requested and adequate and meets the regulations of traffic control, then we'd be willing to work with Metro to lower the speed limit to 40 miles an hour. Deceleration and acceleration lanes. Big proponent of that, wanting to put those in to have proper access into the site. Once again, all subject to Metro approval, but we're not opposed to doing any of these improvements to improve the traffic flow along Bell Road. And then leaving a natural landscape buffer like I showed you on the site plan along Pleasant Hill Road and pushing buildings away. And then finally, we're not trying to max out the site as far as develop every square foot of the site. We want to leave that natural 4-acre buffer against the site, or from the main body of the site up against Bell Road. So we think that's very important to leave that and preserve it in its natural state. So the benefits of the site plan, kind of our construction means, we're trying to work with the existing topography to minimize the grading. We don't want to come in and flatten the site. Multifamily or residential is definitely the highest and best use of the site to minimize the grading. If it was another use of the site, there would be a lot more grading involved, regulations as far as streets and slopes of streets going into sites are lessened. So we feel that residential and buildings that work with the topography to minimize the grading are the highest and best use. Obviously, we showed, everyone knows kind of the location. We would have to cut into the cliff that's right across from Heron Point if that's where the ultimate driveway location is. And so that's where the majority of the excavation would happen in a short period of time in order to cut that road through the site. As far as excavation goes, the highest point of the site that we showed you earlier is at a 600 elevation, and it's a good 550 feet away from the residences along the east side of Bell Road. We have consulted with numerous contractors. The site is actually owned by a general contractor about pre-construction surveys that we would offer. Their standard is 1,000 feet of the site. The state of Tennessee only requires a survey of 300 feet. So those are just things that we're used to doing and would offer up anybody that would be willing to accept the service. And finally, working with the topography, the site has a minimal amount of excavation with the way our site plan is laid out. We've already done a grading study on it. Heron Point across the street had well over 60,000 cubic yards of excavation. In this plan, with the majority of it being in the road, is only 30,000. So less than half of what was experienced across the street. And then with that limited amount of excavation, we're looking at a minimal timeline in order to accomplish the construction and the excavation of the road. So finally, before opening to questions, just want everybody to know, we're very early on in this process. This first meeting we've had, very open to suggestions. We like to engage with the community. We're a collaborative company, and we do understand your concerns and desire to work with you to respond to any concerns that you have. You can write my email address down, email me with any concerns, and we have not submitted anything to the city. We're very early on in this process and wanted to properly introduce the project tonight. Councilman, that concludes anything. I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I do want to also point out we did have Council Lady Delisha Porterfield. She joined us. I wanted to make sure she was here and that her community was aware because this would impact parts of her district as well. with it being right on the border. So thank you, Councilmember Porterfield, for joining us today. So far, there's not been any questions in any of the chats, but if anybody watching right now has a question, please go ahead and ask away. This is your time. There's a concern that there's already too many apartments in the area. As I've looked at this, we do need a lot of extra workforce housing, as far as whether that's apartments, condos, single family homes. That's the purpose of these meetings, is to find out from the community what they are comfortable with. And as always, this meeting is for your benefit, the community, and this is your opportunity to iron out any concerns you may have, because ultimately any zone changes that would be a part of this would have to go through the council, and I would have to sign off on. And so if there's any negative opinion from the community about this, I will not sign off on it. So again, if you're watching this right now, whether on Zoom or Facebook, this is your opportunity to ask any questions that you have to the developer, to any members of Public Works that's here. If you have any planning questions, again, Matthew Wilkinson is here from the council office to assist with those.
I didn't realize that I was muted. How many units were you planning? You may have said so and I missed it.
Yes, ma'am. The current site plan we're showing has 288. And
Okay.
it's not finalized, but it's going to be in that range.
Also, how much blasting? I mean, I'm familiar with the front of Bell Road. Where is that entrance going to be, and how much blasting are you expecting to have to do to get that in? I mean, that's crazy just to even add that many more cars onto Bell Road, but that's a whole different story. I just want to know how much blasting.
So the majority, is my screen still visible?
Yes.
So the majority of the cut is accessing the site right here, which is across from the entrance to Heron Point. Up here, it's
Okay, so that solid black line is not what you were proposing to take down.
the solid black line here is the existing. This is a topography map. So the steeper the cut, the steeper the topography, the closer the lines are together. So we are proposing just to leave a rock face, but cut a road as wide as necessary through that rock face to align up with the driveway across the street. If it's deemed that there's a better location for a driveway and working with the city, then we're open to it. We just made an assumption that most of the time in our experiences, driveways need to align across from each other.
Okay.
Okay, another question that came up on Facebook is, will there be ongoing meetings throughout the development process? So I'll go ahead and answer that one. If you live near the Elm Hill Pike area, you're well aware that one of my goals is to have as much community involvement in these plans as possible. So yes, there will be, we'll have as many as we need to get community input in. And if this does go through the process and goes to the council, there'll be the bonus of having that public hearing at the council. There'll also be your public hearing at the planning commission as well. So there's still plenty more opportunities. And again, if the community feels like they need more meetings, I'll be happy to host more. And I'm sure the developer will be more than willing to work with us on that. Another comment on Facebook, and this is to the developer. We all understand the need for the affordable housing in the city. So there's concern that the rent that is being proposed would be too much to be for most families to consider affordable. Is there any possibility, or have you had any experience working with affordable housing groups or organizations to maybe try and get some assistance to help reduce any costs and therefore save some of that rental costs?
So let me give you a personal background. My introduction into multifamily is with one of the nation's largest affordable housing developers, that was my experience prior to joining Embry. So I do have a lot of experience in understanding how affordable housing works. So what we're trying to do here is one level above affordable housing, which we would call workforce housing. The rents we're proposing are in line with Heron Point, they're in line with the Hamptons at Woodland Point, and that's what we're trying to propose here. The benefit of this site is the landowner understands the economics of our business plan. In fact, they may invest in the project as well if it moves forward, and understand that we need to keep our cost in line in order to offer still a Class A product and offer workforce housing rents. So we're not working towards using any kind of tax credits or affordable housing offsets that are typically available either through the 4% tax credit program and the 1% tax credit program. We're not asking for or looking for any kind of city incentives to develop the project.
Another question from Facebook. If Metro and the council does agree with the improvements to Bell Road, what will the intersection look like? Will there be a dedicated turn lane from Bell Road into the property and into Heron Point?
I assume that would be what would be allowed, and we haven't designed the intersection. I think the main commitment that we're making tonight is we're willing to fund the light. And traffic signals are anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000, and we're willing to make the investment to improve the intersection. But to answer how the full design of ingress and egress to the site and to the site across the street would flow, I don't have that answer until we got further along with the traffic engineer. But I do assume that yes, there would be dedicated turn lanes because that would improve the flow of traffic.
How do you answer question? How do you answer question? Ask a question.
You can go ahead and ask your question now, or you can put it into the chat there's a chat button at the bottom of the screen, or you can go ahead and unmute and ask it right here. This question might be one for Mr. Wilkinson. Will this project trigger a traffic study of Bell Road?
That would, I'm actually going to defer to John Honeysucker on that. I think that's a determination made by Public Works. But I believe given the number of units that a traffic study would be required for that project, that would look at the immediate area around Bell Road where the project is. I don't know if it would be for the entirety of Bell Road. So John could probably better answer that.
To answer your question, it will trigger a traffic study out here.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any more questions, comments? There's a few comments that are coming in on Facebook stating that they just, their opposition to having more apartments in this area.
No, you've lost it.
Wait a minute. No, there's a call coming in.
Oh, okay, we ignore that.
Do you have a time frame for when construction starts and when these apartments would be open for residents?
Considering the process with the SP site plan process of 5 to 6 months, if there's no deferrals, this would not start until probably the fourth quarter of this year if it moves forward. And then it would take about 12 months from the start to deliver the first units.
Okay. Another question was, how far is this from the Food Lion Shopping Center? I don't know the exact.
3 miles.
It's 3 miles. Thank you, Ms. Killian.
Give or take a tenth or two.
Yes, it's going to be past Woodland Point, across from Heron Point if you're driving south on Bell Road. I'm just going through seeing if there's any more questions that have popped up. Oh, I see your hand, Councilmember Porterfield. Go ahead.
Thank you so very much, Councilman Bradford. I appreciate you for inviting me to your meeting today and for making sure that District 29 is able to participate and just kind of add to the conversation. So thank you so much for hosting this, and thank you to the developers for just coming out and engaging in the community. I think this is such an important step to engage the community in the process prior to getting started on something, so that you can make sure that the voice of the community is heard. I'll just kind of share with you guys, what I've heard from my community and what I pretty much have consistently shared with my colleagues when we're looking at additional density. And I think that there, there is the realization that when we look at projects with density, you want those projects to be on those major corridors, right? You don't want a lot of density right in the middle of a neighborhood. So from that perspective, I can see how this would make sense. My concern, and the apartments look very nice, so I just want to recognize that they do look like a high quality project. It looks very nice, and I appreciate your willingness to work with the community. My concerns that I've pretty much expressed consistently is that we do have a lot of density in our area. We do have a lot of apartments in our area. So my constituents in particular have expressed a desire for more single family homes as opposed to apartments. There are also concerns about our schools being at or near capacity. There are also concerns about how this will impact traffic. So, looking at roughly 288 units, how many additional students are we talking about going into our school system? How many more cars are we talking about on Bell Road? How is this going to impact just the existing infrastructure? Are we going to see infrastructure improvements? I know you spoke about the traffic light, but are there other infrastructure improvements that we're thinking about? So with that, I wanted to just kind of share some of the concerns that I always have when I'm looking at density. I am open to learning more about this project. I'm definitely always listening to District 29 residents, and I'll also keep my ear to the ground. Councilman Bradford and kind of follow what your constituents are saying on Facebook and social media. And of course, we'll get emails from District 13 and District 29 about this. So I'll definitely be listening to what the community has to say. But just to, be transparent, I do have reservations when it comes to adding density in an area that in which we've seen so much, not necessarily obviously on that site, but just in our community as it stands. And even going a little further down Bell Road, headed towards the Food Lion, there are lots of apartments headed in that direction. So I just wanted to kind of express those concerns, but I am open to seeing how this plays out and how it develops, and willing to listen to what the community is saying. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, Councilmember Bradford.
No problem. Thank you, Councilmember Porterfield, for your thoughts and helping being a good partner with this Bell Road, Couchville Pike area. Okay, and there are some concerns about how some are stating that the apartments would attract transient residents and therefore increase the crime in the area. Now, we don't have any representatives from the MMPD on this call, and I'm sure the developer probably doesn't have any background information on that, but I just wanted to read that comment out for the record.
Oh, yet. I don't know this site.
Councilman Bradford, if I could address that concern, we do background checks on all residents, criminal background checks for screening purposes. And I also want to reiterate our commitment to work with Metro Police to have a courtesy officer actually live on site we typically will reduce the rental requirement a little bit in order to encourage a police officer to engage with the residents and live on site for obvious reasons.
Thank you for that. All right, just checking to see if there's any more questions on Facebook. Again, if you're watching this on Zoom, feel free to unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask any questions you might have, voice any concerns.
You're not muted.
We're not?
No, we hear you.
Okay, is this a project in line of what happened in 2009 and 10 and 11? Zero interest loans were given to developers who then ripped off poor people in apartments?
No, not at all. Our financing for all of our communities is what they call a joint venture equity platform, where we'll have an equity investor along with Embry employees that personally invest in these communities. And then we'll have a construction loan that we guarantee. So by no means we are paying an interest rate to a commercial bank, Wells Fargo, Chase, BBVA, Compass, just to name a few of the large banks that we do business with. But no, we're not seeking any kind of 0% interest loans or 221D4 FHA loans of any kind. This is straight conventional financing.
Okay, thank you.
There was one comment I overheard, and this, again, Mr. Wilkinson, Mr. Honeysucker, I don't know which one of you could answer this, but I heard someone mention sidewalks. And of course, I'm pro sidewalks. Bell Road needs sidewalks. Am I correct in understanding that under current Metro codes and laws that unless applied for a waiver, they would have to build sidewalks along their edge of the property on Bell Road? Am I understanding that correct?
Is that for me or Matt?
Whichever one. I wasn't sure who to really direct that one towards.
Matt, I think that would fall under planning. I'm not totally sure, but I think that with the way the zoning is set up, if they didn't build them sidewalks, they might have to pay it to an in lieu fund. Matt, can you verify that for me, please?
I believe that's correct. I don't have the major road plan in front of me, but I believe Bell is considered an arterial. So I believe sidewalks would be required. But since they're going the SP route, you can condition sidewalks if you'd like as a condition of approval for the SP. So that could be something that you take care of. If in the slim chance that they aren't required, but I'm pretty sure they would be required. But given the topography right along there, especially with that cliff, depending on how they deal with that, it could make sidewalks expensive. But that's something to look at down the road once more engineering is done.
Thank you for that answer. There's a question, can this have an SP? I believe it's been mentioned several times that this is an SP or a site-specific or special plan. Basically what that means is when it comes down to it, we, the community, have a little bit more say, a little bit more power, as it were, because what we can tell the developer, this is what we want, this is how we want the buildings to look, materials, etc. And the developer agrees to that, it's put into that SP plan. And when it's approved by council, that is the plan the developer has to go by. So, you know, like they mentioned, if sidewalks weren't a requirement, we could ask for sidewalks. Go ahead, throw it out there. You know, the developer has already, as he stated, they're willing to do a lot of investments as far as street lights and other traffic lights and other investments into the Bell Road corridor. So they're already, in my opinion, they're already making that first step to work with the community. Again, not going to push this on anyone. This is the community's will on this. Just with every other proposal that's come through, I just want the community to know what's being proposed, what their options are, and to let them know they can reach out to me at any time and let me know. At the end of this meeting, if you have any further questions or concerns, you're more than welcome to send me an email to russ.bradford@nashville.gov. Sorry, I have too many emails. Again, that's russ.bradford@nashville.gov. Or you can call me at 615-200-0158. And I'll try my best to get back with you and answer any questions you have. Forward any questions or concerns you may have to the developer as well. Councilmember Porterfield, is that an old hand?
No, sir, it's a new one.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilman Bradford. You're doing a wonderful job. My question is to the developer, just kind of two separate questions. Have you all considered, or did you consider possibly looking at the single family homes as opposed to the apartments? I know sometimes it doesn't make financial sense for the developer based on the price, you know, that you maybe purchasing the parcel for, but I don't know the specifics for this site. So just wondering if you all considered that. So that's question one. And then question two, if the community, you know, is in strong opposition against the apartments, have you all thought about anything else that, you know, you may be interested in putting at that site? Or do you all specifically just deal in apartments?
Very good question. So Embry we're a 45 company, and throughout our history, we have done commercial development, industrial development, residential development. We now operate primarily in two platforms, multifamily residential, AKA apartments. And then we also have a single family rental, kind of a build for rent product, which is typically about 10 units per acre. We call them horizontal apartments. It's kind of a new thing picking up steam in the last year. The developers it kind of started out in the Arizona markets, and it trickled to the east. But we do have that platform working on several sites. This site, with the topography that it has, really lends itself to this type of construction because we're able to work with some of these buildings will actually be split level foundations in order to minimize retaining walls. If this was going to be the single family development, the topography really is so strong that you wouldn't be able to develop most of the site. And what part of the site you could develop, you would have a whole lot of excess grading that you actually don't have with multifamily. If this site was industrial, it would have to really be excavated down and brought down closer to grade along Bell Road, which would be massive amounts of excavation. And that would bode for the same thing as commercial. Typically, those building footprints are much larger. Access is more important. Visibility is more important for other uses other than residential. So if it was going to be a non-residential use, the amount of excavation would probably make the economics of the project not work for us. Our primary focus right now as a company is residential development. So we would not be interested in looking at it from a commercial or industrial use, but we do have experience enough to answer the questions about what would be required if it was going to be any use other than residential. Did that answer?
Thank you. Yeah, that answered it. Thank you.
Sure.
Aren't we having to get out of the system of building apartments where there is no wealth to be gained by the residents? Whereas if you build single family homes that people can buy at this time at an enormously low rate, 2.5% mortgage, and they could generate wealth. We have gone down. Most of the people in this country are losing money and becoming poor, and more people going into poverty, and people having to live in apartments where there is no restrictions on whatever you want to charge for rent is fine. Can we go in and build single family homes and help people generate security?
This site absolutely could be single family. That's not Embry's business platform, but it could be another builder's platform. We're here tonight to talk about what our vision for the site is, and trying to work with the community to answer any questions or concerns. But right now, our business model is not to do any kind
not
of
build wealth from rental. You want to suck the renters dry.
Rental communities are now, it's changed over the last 10 years. Rent by choice is how we like to observe it. There's plenty of opportunities for people to buy homes at the low interest rate mentioned, but right now with people on the move, wanting to live in different spots, wanting to move every year, there's definitely a demand for renter by choice.
Because they don't have any other choice.
Well,
Councilman Bradford, I did have a landscaping question, if I could be recognized.
You are recognized.
Thank you. The back portion, I know it leads up to Pleasant Hill Road, and it's a little bit hard to see with the topography. Is there I'm assuming that there's a buffer. I'm guessing maybe those are what I would assume would be a tree buffer behind where you said those detached garages would be. If you could just speak, and I apologize if I missed it if you said it earlier, but if you could just speak a little bit about what that buffer would be like between the complex and Pleasant Hill Road. Is it, would they be able to access Pleasant Hill Road, or are they more on a plateau higher up than the actual road? And for the individuals whose homes are right there now, what would they see? And again, I don't know the elevation. Looking at the topography map, it's a little bit hard for me to kind of tell that elevation. So are they, looking straight across and this is level to them? Are they looking at mountain and it's going to be elevated on the top of the mountain? Will they be able to access it from their home? So if you could just speak a little bit about, kind of the buffer between what you all are proposing and what's already there.
Sure, very good question. So we want to be good neighbors, and the first thing we looked at is, can we do something architecturally with the building to serve as a buffer? The best thing we do most common are detached garages that are available for residents. So we could line this entire site with detached garages, and they would do very well. To answer your question about, I don't want to take out any more vegetation than we absolutely have to build this project. So if there's ways to have building splits, meaning 4-story on one side and 3-story on the other to work with topography, that's what we're proposing to do. Right now, what we want to do is leave an existing buffer along Pleasant Hill Road. The grading, to answer your question, you see this black line right here that my mouse is over? That's the start of a retaining wall that would come and wrap around the edge of the site. So the site on the southern end of the site would be built up in relation to Pleasant Hill Road. As you go north from about the midpoint of the site, you're essentially matching the existing topography of Pleasant Hill Road. So to answer your question directly, it's kind of a hybrid of what particular people along Pleasant Hill Road would see. Some would be looking at landscaping that would screen a retaining wall. Other people would be looking strictly at landscaping. And, if the landscaping along there is not sufficient enough in its existing form, then we're dedicated to planting additional trees and shrubs, whatever's desired to be an adequate buffer.
And if I could just jump in real fast, we can require landscape buffers as a condition of approval for the SP. Generally, landscape buffers aren't required along street frontages. However, there's nothing saying that you can't do it. So if that's something the community wants, then that can certainly be added as a condition of approval.
And Mr. Wilkinson, sorry, Councilmember. Mr. Wilkinson, do you have any knowledge as far as the tree ordinance that was passed the last term? Does this fall under it? How would that impact what vegetation they can and can't remove as they're building this?
Unfortunately, I haven't looked at the tree ordinance in a few months, so I would have to go back and refresh on that. But since this project hasn't started yet, hasn't even gotten its zoning yet, it would fall under the parameters of the new tree ordinance. And so I think they would have increased tree requirements. But like I said, I haven't looked at those requirements in a while, so I wouldn't be able to speak up to them right now.
Councilman Bradford, John Honeysucker, is it okay to speak on something?
Go ahead.
All right. With this particular company, let me just give you just a brief history of how they have had to comply with Metro Water and Public Works regulations to the strictest of ability policy. And they have previously, based off of the previous developments, they have done a very good job of complying with those. I'm not speaking in favor or against. I'm only speaking of what I've seen with this developer from the previous developments that they have taken place within Davidson County. We have held them to very strict standards to make sure that they comply with that, even from a public works, water, stormwater, engineering development standpoint, and they have did that. I don't see why they would not do that here. As for the trees, Councilman Bradford, they would fall into that category because the more trees they leave, the better water absorption that will help with stormwater. And based off the previous projects that they have done within Davidson County, they have done a very good job of complying with those regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Honeysucker, for that information. Can the developer kind of go back and speak to more about the blasting, about how much he would expect to be done, how long it would potentially last in order to make this site buildable?
Sure, that's a very good question. So I want to speak specifically about this site because this is what we've studied so far with this site plan is Mary McGowan, she's listening in on the call. She's with Kimley Horn Engineer, very seasoned engineer with the local presence in Nashville, and she's done a grading plan of what they just call a heat map, which is cut fill, and estimated that the amount of cut, which would be excavation, would be 30,000 cubic yards. I know that sounds like a big number and everyone has to put that in their own perspective, but from a grading standpoint, that's actually a fairly small amount of cut for a job that's, essentially a 16-acre site. Like I mentioned earlier, the site across the street is over 60,000 cubic yards. I talked to the contractor. The contractor that owns this site currently was the contractor that did the development across the street, at least the earthwork portion of it. So your blasting is really the only way to develop sites in Davidson County and in Williamson County for that matter too. We have a lot of experience down there. The rock is so hard that the only other way to do it is use a big tractor mounted, what they call a hoe ram, which is just it sounds like a great big jackhammer. And if you do that process, it's a whole lot longer, it's a whole lot noisier, and just it's a nuisance to the neighborhood. Blasting is typically quicker. There's different ways to blast. There's different levels of charges that we can use to minimize the impact. But the main thing is to do it safely, do it quickly, get in and get out, but also take the precautions of working with the neighborhood. The site contractors offer inspections of homes. The state of Tennessee requires 300 feet. This particular contractor wants to offer up to 1,000 feet from the perimeter of the site. So anybody that's willing to let them in their home for pre-inspections, and then follow that up with a post-inspection. We use seismographs to measure the amount of vibration, if any, and that is a proven method of trying to alleviate any concerns that if there is damage caused by any kind of earthwork operations, that then it's properly assessed and documented and then remedied. So it's not an insurance claim; it's a claim directly settled by the contractor. In Embry being an in-house general contractor or a licensed general contractor in the state of Tennessee, would definitely be on the hook along with the subcontractor that does the work.
Well, the rocks here are so bad that when they built the apartments across from where you're going to be, the houses were damaged to a point, and then we were too far away to make claims. And so when we finally approved to put in 5 houses where there was lots of rock, and they put them in as rentals in a single family home dwelling, they actually had to use those hammers. So we didn't have any damage from them, but we certainly had from the people across the street from you.
Point.
Certainly understand that. Back to the last slide about us, we go above and beyond. We want to, we're engaging on the front end of the community. We want to engage throughout the construction process if the project moves forward, and that includes allowing us to come work with you and our consultant team to come address any pre-construction issues with the house and any post-construction issues with your homes as a result of any construction activities on the site. It's really a good program if you're willing to let our consultants in. The property is owned by Jones Brothers Construction, the owners of Jones Brothers Construction. They've been longtime Nashville site contractors and they know how to do it right. It just does take some cooperation with individual residents to allow us to do those inspections.
Okay.
We are at 5 minutes till, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time and the developers as well. So one last call for any questions or comments from either Facebook or Zoom, and then we'll wrap up. Any more questions from anybody?
Councilman
Okay.
Bradford, I just wanted to thank the developer again for coming out and for hosting this meeting. I don't know, just for transparency, I don't know where I'm going to land on it. Again, I welcome comments from District 29 residents as well as from District 13 residents. But I do want to say, so again, similar to what Mr. Honeysucker said, so this is not an endorsement in any way or a pledge of support. But I do want to say that I appreciate the developers' willingness to hear from the community and work with the community. And it's very refreshing. We don't often see developers at this stage being willing to be flexible in certain manners. I've had numerous conversations with developers that I've just had to tell them absolutely not, because they were so rigid and not wanting to get feedback from the community. And similar to what Councilman Bradford said, I won't move forward, if my community's not in support. So the fact that you all are willing to hear from the community and willing to make adjustments, that is very much appreciated. So I just wanted to tell them thank you so much. And again, that's definitely not saying that I'll support it, but that is saying that, again, I appreciate it. I look forward to hearing how how this proposal continues to develop and continue to hear from our community. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Agreed. And
Political contributions.
so I definitely want to mirror what my colleague, Councilmember Porterfield, stated. It's the developers don't have to do this much work this early on in the process. I definitely appreciate Embry and developers for willing to, our initial conversations, I did mention the concerns that the neighborhood has about the traffic on Bell Road, about the blasting issues we've been having, and seeing that they're doing what they can to try and mitigate as much as possible, such as the design of the plan, and voluntarily pitching in to help with street traffic lights and much needed improvements on Bell Road. Definitely shows that they are willing to work with the community. And again, not saying that this is an open endorsement for this plan. I still will wait and hear how the community goes on this as we continue this conversation. So again, if you have any comments or concerns that you'd like for me to relay to the developers on this project, please send me an email. That's russ.bradford@nashville.gov. You can send me messages on Facebook, text messages, give me a call, 615-200-0158. And within the next couple of weeks, I'll have a debrief with the developers and go over any new concerns or new questions that have come up and try and get those questions answered to the best of our abilities. So with that, again, thank you everybody for coming on tonight and listening and having open minds, both community and the developer. And with that, I hope you all have a great evening and have a safe weekend.
Again, Russ, thank you.
Thank you.
Same to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Porterfield.